How you doing, everybody? It's your boy Wardy, and as you can see, we're back at it talking about the Amazons. And when I say Amazons, I should really just say the absolute mess that is the New York Metropolitans, as it is currently 12:20 a.m. at the time of recording this. So if you guys could smash that like and subscribe button for your boy Wardy, as the grind never stops here on WardyNYM. Even in a year where the Mets haven't shown up for the past month, nothing changes here on the largest platform, not directly affiliated with the Mets or SNY. Smash those buttons. Thank you all so much in advance, guys. We just got done being live for roughly 2 hours, breaking down everything that's going wrong in Mets land. Now 11 games below 500 after being swept here by the LA Dodgers and all the drama that ensued thanks to guys like Jorge Lopez at team meeting, and why the Mets have themselves a major problem that I need to deep dive further. But if you haven't checked out our recent live show in which I answered live callers from you, the fans, voicing your opinions and venting about the Metropolitans' early struggles so far this season, when I say early, it has now been over 50 plus games where they have played beyond mediocre, lifeless baseball. Again, check out that post-game coverage if you haven't already, as we broke down a lot of what you're going to hear in this condensed form. But I have more thoughts that I need to share on this one. I can't go to sleep until I share them, so let's just let it rip, shall we? Because as we know, the LOL Mets narrative is not going away anytime soon, unfortunately. And shout out, as always, to our amazing sponsor at Silver MLB. We'll get into them a little bit later in the show here, but I need to break down for you all why Jorge Lopez was DFA'd by the Mets here, what this means for the bullpen going forward potentially, and ultimately the true lack of leadership by the Mets, even with Francisco Lindor doing everything he possibly can. There is a lot of major red flags with this Mets team that goes well beyond just a simple fact of, okay, we're 11 games below 500 right now, and in no way, shape, or form a playoff caliber team. Let's get into why exactly are the Mets having these type of major problems that they're currently having, and why was Jorge Lopez at the forefront of it all today? Because unless one, you were living under a rock, and two, maybe you didn't watch the game or chimed into our post-game show, you're unaware with the drama that ensued. So let me enlighten you a little bit, shall we? Because as we take a look here, let's go to my second slide. This is all going to be coming from my Twitter. Jorge Lopez pitched in the Mets' 10-3 loss today. He did not do the Mets any favors, nor did Adam Ottavino. The two together completely blew it for the Mets on the pitching end, even though the Mets offense, of course, had nothing to add any type of lead or insurance after eliminating a 3-run deficit halfway through the ball game, thanks to a JD Martinez RBI double, which made it 3-3. A couple bullpen, blown situations later, Jorge Lopez gets in a confrontation with a third base ump that we see there in this game. He's thrown out of the game, and Jorge Lopez makes sure to do this on his way out. Just take a look, folks.
Round has just gotten worse.
Whoa.
And Lopez responds by tossing his glove up over the netting and into the crowd.
Okay, so that in itself, major red flag number one. It's one thing to be slamming your bat, doing your best Jeff McNeil impression every single time you pop fly out, to the infield or to left field or grounding out to first. But it's another thing to be a pitcher on the mound and to be so frustrated that you go the lengths of tossing your glove into the stands. Furthermore, I'm pretty sure a Yankee fan picked it up, so it's not even like it did anybody good in that situation. And in all seriousness, as we take a look here on just my Twitter as a whole here, folks, because this is what we were just discussing, we saw that happen, right? Then, okay, we see the Mets go on. They lose 10-3 here through my feed. We see I had my live show going both live on Twitter and YouTube. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and follow me on Twitter. Over 14,000 followers. Thank you guys so much for that. Really appreciate it. But then as we advance here, we get on to some comments. Mind you, this is after the Mets had a 40-minute meeting led by Francisco Lindor post-game today, so the media did not have any entry. It was a closed-door meeting for 40 minutes. The entire team really sitting down and talking about how unfortunately terrible this team has been and what they can do to try to right their wrongs and fast. And after that 40-minute meeting, to have a true leadership, if you will, led by Francisco Lindor, Jorge Lopez does not hold anything back and shares the following comments.
As said that he understands the emotion, but that particular action of throwing your glove into the stands was unacceptable. Looking back on it, do you regret doing that?
No, I don't regret it.
So let's get this straight. Carlos Mendoza made it known directly after the game that they are not okay with Jorge Lopez doing this, and they will address it internally. In response to this, Jorge Lopez doubles down and says, I don't regret it. One, I'm beyond frustrated. And what you're going to hear from Jorge Lopez isn't technically wrong outside of a couple other teams of baseball, but to hear this from an own player on your roster is a bigger problem, and is exactly why the Mets look like a true dumpster fire that they are.
I think I've been looking the worst team probably in the whole MLB, so you know, whatever happened, happened. So.
Mind you, this is again after clarification because as we know, Jorge Lopez, the Puerto Rican, does have a little bit of broken English. So again, Steve Gelbs and others asked him to really clarify, did he mean it when he says that he's on the worst effing team? And he said, yeah, probably. You know, I'm sure that's what I said. He also went on to say that he understands the clubhouse is probably frustrated and bothered with him. He feels like the worst teammate on the worst team. That is what Anthony DiComo's latest quote said in regards to exactly that. So Jorge Lopez went out of his way to say how the Mets are quite literally the worst team in Major League Baseball, having an expletive in doing so. You might as well say that he's Wardy because that is the type of wordplay that's something that I would do, of course, ranting in our post-game shows, being beyond frustrated with a Mets team that has been piss poor for over a month straight now, and really a couple of years now since August of the 2022 season, if we're being quite frank. So Jorge Lopez makes those remarks after, again, a 40-minute sit-down meeting with Francisco Lindor and the entire team as they're talking about their current struggles, after having a discussion with Carlos Mendoza in which Lopez initially said that he didn't speak to him. However, a recent article by Anthony DiComo suggests that that was not true, that he was not being completely honest, and Jorge Lopez just looks like a guy completely tapped out, not wanting to be here, exactly why a team like the Atlanta Braves will likely pick him up off waivers in the next 24 to 48 hours because Jorge Lopez has in fact been DFA'd by the New York Metropolitans. That did not take long. We see from Joel Sherman here stating exactly that again, he is not going to be with the Mets anymore. And now we have the graphic that I post there asking for everybody's thoughts on this. And mine is simply put, I think two things can be true. Was Jorge Lopez really wrong for saying that the Mets are, you know, effing one of, if not the worst in Major League Baseball? No, he's not wrong because that is accurate. But what is the problem is, one, to do that as a player, to come out and say that in the clubhouse is ridiculous. That throws your entire team under the bus in that sense. Two, to go out your way to make these remarks as well really is the type of remarks that you make not only backed by emotion, but something that could be had if you don't want to be part of the organization. And Jorge Lopez, 1,000%, will be picked up by a team on paper that is better than the New York Mets right now. So I think he played things in his hand exactly how he wanted to, if that was the thought process here, because there's only a few teams worse in Major League Baseball than the Mets at the moment. You can count them on your hands. So yes, he's not wrong for saying that, you know, we're the effing worst, maybe not technically the worst, but I understood what he was trying to say there. I understood the sentiment, and I agree with him. This Mets team has been god-awful. They have been far from the team that we were hoping that they would be at this point in the season. And Lopez, who, yes, of course, got blown up a bit today against the Dodgers, hasn't looked great in his last couple outings, but has been a very effective and useful reliever for the Mets so far this season, is now being cut not because of his on-field performance, but rather all the emotions and the hecticness and the lack of, again, having a proper clubhouse structure in place is exactly why he's no longer going to be with the club. And before I get into Francisco Lindor's remarks and really this entire situation as a whole, why this is such a terrible thing for the Mets and why they have major problems that goes well beyond just Jorge Lopez, before I do, folks, I do have to tell you briefly about our today's video sponsor, that being in Sorare MLB, our official Sorare segment, as you can see here. And simply put, if you guys don't know Sorare MLB, it is the best MLB fantasy game out there. You're combining MLB The Show, basically being your own GM, that type of video game, while also playing a real fantasy game. So the key differences is you're buying, selling, and trading unique cards that, again, you can help build your roster on. You can buy and sell and trade these cards virtually with your friends or random people online, the marketplace, the Sorare MLB app, or of course they're on desktop. You enter weekly tournaments after drafting your team with these player cards, and how these players perform is indicative on how they perform in real life. So again, if you had Will Smith against the Mets for the past couple of days, you were coming out like a bandit with a lot of points and a lot of production in these tournaments because he absolutely killed the Mets with 3 home runs in a 24-hour span, unfortunately. But for me, I'm going to build my roster for you guys shortly, just to give you guys an idea as to kind of what to expect here with Sorare MLB. But you can enter, again, for free by clicking my unique link down below. If you do well in these tournaments based on how the players perform in real life, you can win cash prizes. Again, we're talking hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. Mets ticket prizes. We gave away a bunch of Mets tickets on the channel this past month, all for just signing up with my unique link and entering a free tournament. It is that simple. So all you guys need to do, again, is enter your weekly tournaments. Again, you can enter on Mondays and Fridays when they officially begin. So I'm, again, jumping the chase here a little bit. I'm going to show you one of the tournaments that I'll be entering, and I'm going to put Lance Lynn there as one of my starters, Tanner Scott and I'm entering a limited monthly chase tournament. So the only difference between, say, these and others is you got to make sure that you have these type of limited cards, which again, you can buy and sell and trade on the marketplace. These cards aren't free. However, there are tournaments that you can play with free common cards, again, where you don't have to spend a dime should you not wish. And then you have Adley Rutschman putting there, Brian Reynolds. I'm going to put Mr. Adolis Garcia for my flex player in there. I'm going to put Cal Riley. That's my roster. The only guy you can't see is Alex Bregman because he's cut off in the graphic. But this is the lineup I'm going to be rolling with for my latest tournament. So to everyone that enters their weekly tournaments with Sorare MLB, wishing you all the best of luck. And let me know how you do in the comments down below for my Sorare players. And again, shout out as always to Sorare MLB. But as we hop back into this one, folks, what I really want to get into, the most important thing, in my opinion, to emphasize here, and why the Mets have themselves a major problem on their hands at the moment, is simply put, you just had Francisco Lindor go out of his way to be like, you know what, we need a team meeting. We're 11 games below 500. This was another deflating series. We have been playing piss poor baseball. We are now sitting 11-24, 11-25 or so since Francisco Alvarez has been down with injury. The Mets have been the worst team in baseball during that stretch for the most part, and they have been mediocre to say the least. There's a reason why Jorge Lopez was fed up, because honestly, I wouldn't want to be part of this godforsaken team the way that he certainly doesn't either. And there's truth to that and understanding to that. And a key part of this is the fact that Francisco Lindor went out of his way to do this 40-minute meeting. And after that, these are the kind of quotes that we get from a player, tells you the lack of unity in this clubhouse, one. And trust me when I say Jorge Lopez could be an outlier. He said he's the worst teammate imaginable. Maybe he actually is. Maybe he does have, unfortunately, some personal problems, and that goes in hand with his approach with fellow teammates in the clubhouse. I can't speak on his behalf. I'm just relaying everything that we're kind of seeing and hearing. But to have, again, your essential team leader, one of your captains, and Lindor, go out your way to do this, and then this is the first headline that comes after, shows you not that the Mets aren't just LOL Mets, but the Mets right now are a huge and a massive laughingstock throughout the entire course of Major League Baseball. And as much as I have hated the term LOL Mets throughout my young fandom, of course, as a Mets fan, it could be more of the truth. It truly is the way that this team continues to find more heartbreaking, frustrating ways to lose every single night. And you know how it goes. It's the three things. When you don't have starting pitching, you have hitting. When you have starting pitching, you don't have hitting. When you have hitting, you don't have bullpen. Nothing has been in unison among those three things for the Mets all season long. Even during their 12-3 stretch when they were playing good baseball, they still couldn't hit a lick against competent starters, which is why their numbers were inflated in the 7th, 8th, and 9th innings when they had those little bit of rallies. The Mets have just a couple wins at Citi Field over the past month, throughout the month of May, all of which came in walk-off dramatic fashion. That's what it took for the Mets just to get wins at Citi Field this month. The same exact way the Mets, again, right now, are going to be nowhere even remotely close to even sniffing or thinking about playoffs should they continue to free fall so easily the way that they are right now. And I'm looking at not only Francisco Lindor, Pete Alonso, who of course got hit on the hand from James Paxton today. Imaging came back clear. He's getting further imaging done. Hopefully everything's fine on that front. But your entire core group is underwhelming and not playing to their caliber, and that continues. This is not a David Stearns problem. This is far more of an inherited problem of what this core is and what this roster construction is. And something that, again, Chris Simon, who was a great caller in my post-game show earlier tonight at the time recording this, who works at Citi Field, really emphasized this. In essence, it is kind of a good thing that we're seeing the Mets free fall like this, so that way you can understand the true colors with some of these players. Are guys going to get out of ruts as soon as they leave Queens? Absolutely. That 100% happens. I do believe that there is a curse to an extent with this Mets team. I don't know who signed a devil with the Mets to make sure that they won in 1986. All I know is that did in fact happen, and the Mets have to deal with turmoil and pretty much hell throughout the days and weeks and months and years going forward. There's been nothing to suggest for my belief to be otherwise, truthfully. And I know I'm only half joking here when I say this, because this team is in so many ways cursed. For a Mets team that entered the season, again, just pushing for playoff aspirations, trying to crack that third wildcard spot, trying to loom around a 500 ball club, goes from an 0-5 start to a 12-3 run, and with just a handful of wins in the entire month of May. The Mets avoided the June swoon because they had themselves a miserable May in doing so. so. Now we look into June for potentially worse than what we've already gotten, and as much as Francisco Alvarez is a huge impact for this Mets team, by the time he returns in the next week or two from his rehab assignment that begins this Thursday, technically today at the time of recording this, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm not mistaken, so there you go. I will tell you this, it may have already been a hole way too deep to dig themselves out of. The Mets may very well be complete full-blown sellers by the deadline at this rate right now, and when you look at the leadership, let's take an emphasis on the lack thereof, okay? Because I think there is a massive problem to go out of your way to have a big team meeting that was supposedly productive, and then this to be the biggest takeaway directly out of it. That is not okay, because that tells you that not everyone is listening and hearing you the way that you think, Lindor, the same way it goes for others. And Lindor did preface that the meeting wasn't about Lopez. He's not the reason why we lost today. It's nothing along those lines. But at the same time, it is something to make note of how Carlos Mendoza says it's inexcusable. Basically, everyone is like, okay, this isn't okay. And Lopez doubles down. He says, one, I don't care. And two, I'm going to just say we're the worst effing team. So pretty much a couple things stand out to me. One, Jorge Lopez did not want to be here anymore. And that's okay. Do you blame him? I sure as heck don't. So he's out of here. And he's likely going to be picked up by a playoff contending team in the next 24 to 48 hours, understandably and justifiably so. But when you look at the Mets and the current rut that they find themselves in, how they dig themselves out, I think we need to take a much harder look on this organization as a whole from a leadership standpoint. The Mets have zero identity. They have zero leadership whatsoever. Teams do not go through the type of turmoil consistently the way that the Mets have. And while, yes, they've made a lot of drastic decisions to their roster and their coaching staff and front office, since Steve Cohen has become owner, it's basically been a completely new staff every single year out there. There has been this collective core of Jeff McNeil, Pete Alonso, Brandon Nimmo, Francisco Lindor. They've continued to underwhelm in more ways than one. That's not only a problem, but that just shows you that, okay, if the Mets are not going to be able to win with this core group, are they ever going to be able to win with this core group? And that leads to the greater questions of the future of a Pete Alonso in a contract year. Could he be dealt by the trade deadline? That is a greater possibility now than ever, I would honestly say. The same way with him walking in the offseason may very well happen, because quite frankly, why would Pete Alonso want to stay with the Mets outside of him having his personal attachment, being a homegrown talent coming over from Florida as a second-round pick or so? Outside of just the emotions behind that, there's really nothing to justify Alonso wanting to be here long term, because even with a Steve Cohen that's willing to spend, and I know wants what's best for this team, doesn't change the fact that we have yet to see the results. And until we see the results, I don't blame anyone for not wanting to buy in, the same way that a lot of you Mets fans right now are watching this video not bought in on the Mets whatsoever, completely chewing them out for the season, unless you're a schmuck like me that covers them for a living, where I have no choice but to talk about them no matter how much I love or hate them at the moment. You guys can, again, take the time to tune them out. And that is exactly what I feel like the Mets are kind of doing with themselves. They are just floating. They have to play baseball every single day, no matter how piss poor they are playing. So they're going out there, they're trying their best, but we're just seeing the same common mistakes between the lack of unison with this offense, just piss poor approach with runners in scoring position. Pitching wise, again, when you're having starting pitching and you're not walking guys everyone their mother the way that the Mets haven't throughout the series against the Dodgers by a stretch, your bullpen can't save you whatsoever after your bullpen carried you throughout the first month plus of the season. Again, it has been Jekyll and Hyde with this Mets team, and one thing has definitely stood out more than anything else. They have a major problem. There is zero, and I mean zero, leadership truly with this organization to warrant saying, okay, we are going to get out of these ruts. We are going to feel better about ourselves. They can say the same nonsense in their post-game pressers every single day of the week, but those Mets players know just as well as us Mets fans know this team as currently stands is going absolutely nowhere until they prove and show us otherwise. That is exactly why David Stern's Mets Pobo 48 hours ago said it himself in a pregame presser. This team is not playing to a playoff caliber, one, right now, and two, they need to show it. We have faith to an extent in these guys being able to do that, but they need to prove it to us as well. The Mets have done nothing to prove that the Mets are going to be in any position to warrant having continued consistent success, one, let alone getting back to 500 and starting to push for playoffs from there. Right now, we're looking at a free-falling season where the Mets will be selling off as soon as they possibly can, again, until something changes and of drastic magnitude. Will that happen? Again, your guess is as good as mine. All I know is this team has a major problem. I'm looking at all the leaders in the clubhouse. because this is sticking out like a red flag like no tomorrow. And I'm looking at not only the lack of leadership, and this is where Carlos Mendoza comes into play to an extent, because of what type of role does he have in a discussion like this where Lindor's being the driver behind the team meeting? Why wasn't it Carlos Mendoza? Have there been recent team meetings with Carlos Mendoza that we're not necessarily aware of? Again, I can speak on that behalf either, but it's something to ponder and think about for Mendy, who I am utmost certain will be the manager for the Mets for the entire season, regardless on what happens with them, because that is a David Stearns hire. But what isn't a David Stearns hire is guys like Eric Chavez, Jeremy Barnes, Jeremy Hefner, etc. Those are guys I do anticipate out of the coaching staff, even with in-season changes with the way that they are drastically underperforming. What a coaching staff that was adopted from the previous regime under Billy Epler and Buck Showalter, and not David Stearns and his guys. His only guy is Carlos Mendoza, and I don't have major gripes with Mendoza, and I'm not going to put all the blame on his shoulders right now, because he said it himself that is inexcusable. That will be addressed, and the Mets again quickly address that situation, basically saying if you're going to talk down on the team like this, you're not going to be part of the organization. So maybe Lopez got what he wanted in the end, but at the same time, us Mets fans, what did we get? We got some bluntness, which I am not against at all. I think that's good. I don't think it was good how it played out and how it happened, but it was refreshing a little bit, honestly, to hear a player say the things that he said, because we all agree. We all see the same thing. This is the worst effing team in Major League Baseball outside of a select few, especially for the payroll. There's nothing at all to justify the lack of performance. A truly underwhelming season. Again, that is an understatement to the highest degree. So Mets fans, whoever you're a fan of, I want to know your thoughts in the comments down below. How do you feel about the Metsies playing absolutely piss poor baseball so far this season one, but now getting to the point where they are going to be in headlines? You will see more than likely in the coming hours at the time of recording this, the New York Post's latest headline for you to pick up and frame on your wall behind me like I do with Lindor and others, how Jorge Lopez is being DFA'd because we're the worst effing team in baseball. The LL Mets narrative will continue, and us Mets fans will continue to be laughed on by Yanks fans, Braves fans, and all opposing fans of Major League Baseball, because we truly are a laughingstock of an organization. And Steve Cohen is seeing it right with his very eyes. He saw Lopez make his comments. He saw also guys like Adam Ottavino even go to bat for Lopez when it was in contradiction. He said, he didn't mean what he said and all that, when Lopez doubled down afterwards, right? So just so much nonsense going on in Mets land. It sounds like a day that ends in Y. But in the meantime, us Mets fans, how do we get through this? It's by having our call-in sessions, our vent sessions, and really saying it how it is with how bad this team has been and how things can be better by righting the ship, by calling up some kids, by making some drastic organizational changes to the roster for guys that will not be here beyond 2024 more than likely regardless. We know the Mets will be sellers by the deadline. It's a matter of just how much, and right now it's looking like a full-blown fire sale for a dumpster fire of an organization you call the New York Metropolitans. So that's going to do it for me, Mets fans. Again, drop all your thoughts, your reactions, everything down below. And if you guys want to have your Mets voice heard, make sure you chime into our post-game shows. We are live after every single game throughout the regular season, and this week in particular, every live show I do will feature either a special guest or live callers from you, the fans. I want to hear from you guys more than anything. I need to hear different perspectives, because I'm tired of spewing the same nonsense, and again, watching and then breaking down the same thing every single night. The Mets have a record of 13-9 this season with the lead after the 7th inning. So just for some context as to how piss poor they have been on closing out games 1, and 2, just how inconsistent that they have been. There has been no unity whatsoever. There is no identity in this organization, and that is something that's going on well beyond the 2024 season, and something that we're not going to see until there's a structure in place with their front office and coaching staff in unity for multiple years on end. This is just year 1 of Stearns and Mendoza. Do not expect that to happen overnight. In the meantime, we're unfortunately going to have to deal with the reality, which is this godforsaken team. Thank you guys all so much for watching. We'll be back live later today for our latest post-game show. So until then, have a great rest of your night, day, evening, whenever you're watching this. This is your boy Wardy, signing out. Let's go Mets, baby. Peace.